Perfect. So welcome everyone. Today's webinar topic is going to be all about assets in LaserPro. So there's a couple of different ways that you can manage assets in LaserPro. And I'll give a bit of an overview first, and then we can delve into those different ways in the system and talk about some of the different setup options that are available within the assets themselves, and then some of the add-on features as well with the kind of further step up that you have as an option as well in that area, and then some of the reporting that ties into all of that as well. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, I do unfortunately only have one screen today, not in my usual office setup. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat and I will come back to them probably towards the end. Or feel free to unmute yourself as well, but the chat might be easier just because I won't be able to see you all otherwise, because I only have one screen. So thanks for bearing with me, but let me share my screen. Perfect. Hopefully you can all see that LaserPro okay. Okay, silence is a good thing on that one. So a bit of an overview on assets. So if you do any kind of maintenance work, whether that's just ad hoc maintenance or preventative maintenance in your business, just going to come back and quickly admit that person. If you do that within your business, we can set up the assets in LaserPro so that way we can manage and track them and record all of that history in the system as well. So I guess the saying data is key, and the data that you get out is only as good as the data you put in is quite prevalent in this situation. So if we do want to record asset information, we do need to put it into the system so that way we can get reports out, whether that's for our own internal purposes or whether that's for reports to the end customer as well on the asset testing. So in terms of the kind of hierarchy of how assets work in LaserPro, you obviously have a customer card, and then against the customer card you have your site, or multiple sites in some cases, and then the assets sit against the sites themselves. So it's a bit of a hierarchy of how it all intertwines, how it all links. So if you do ever want to look at any assets, if we navigate into the people menu and then into sites, and then I'm just going to bring up one that I prepared earlier. If you click into the site card itself, we then have this customer assets tab in the top row to then see any assets that may have been set up. Now, these are just some that have been prepared earlier. You could have 1, 10, 50, 100 assets in this list. It really comes down to, I guess, what kind of assets you're maintaining for this site. So you could have a few or you could have many, and maybe they're different types as well. This one here is a heat pump, but depending on whether you're electrical plumbing or what kind of services you offer, they may be different variations in this list. So once we've got the actual asset information here, we do have quite a few options down the bottom to then manage these assets. Now, this may make a little bit more sense once I go through the setup in a second, but we do have these options here if we do need to manipulate or change anything around those assets. So I might come back to this in a minute, and hopefully that will make a little bit more sense. So to set them up in the first instance, if you have never done any kind of assets in your LaserPro before and you're not sure where to start, this is going to be the start from here. So if we come back to the dashboard, if we navigate into the system cog in the top right hand corner and then into setup, and if we scroll down on the left hand menu, we've got this customer assets tab. Now, if you hover over this and you only have one option, the asset builder, that is okay. That just means that you don't have what's called maintenance planner enabled. So that's an add-on feature, and I'll touch on that a little bit later in terms of what that is and what extra features that gives you. But if you only have the first option and you don't have service levels, that is okay. So if we click into the asset builder, we've got some that have been pre-set up here. But what we can set up in here is the different types of physical assets, whether that's, electrical and you've got emergency and exit lights, plumbing, you might have backflow, whatever that looks like in terms of what you need to maintain. we can set them up here as a type. And then we can, if you have maintenance planner, you have this service level column. So if you don't have maintenance planner, you may not see this, and that's okay. But if I click into create new asset type, we can put in the name here. So let's go emergency and exit light. We can put in a cost center. This does say optional, but I do try and recommend linking this where you can, especially if it's, say, commercial maintenance. Just so that way, as you raise jobs for it, it's going to automatically link to that cost center. So it just saves a little bit of legwork further down the workflow. This reference section is more so if you want to put in a specific standard, if you need to reference something. Now, this is only, I guess, probably prevalent if you're then pulling forms out of LaserPro in terms of the testing or reporting. So they may not be applicable to you, but it is there if you'd like to fill it in. There is a default technician optional as well. The only reason that I would probably utilize this is if it is a specific technician that's maybe qualified to do this type of maintenance. And I'll use gas as an example. I'm assuming New Zealand is probably similar to Australia, and that you need to be gas qualified to do that. So if it's a plumber and maybe they don't have that gas accreditation, then and you only have one person, well, maybe we could populate that person here, and again save us some steps further down the line because it's going to pick them up from the get-go. If that's not the case, then you can leave that blank. Now, the next tab along service levels, we're going to skip over that for now and come back to that because that is maintenance planner specific. But what I really wanted to show you was this custom field section. So if we come in here, we can create custom fields. Now, you can create as many of these as you'd like. You could create 1, 10, etc. I will note, though, that if you want to record more than, I want to say 6 off the top of my head, that if you then try and pull out asset-specific forms for testing out of LaserPro, it'll only show you the top 6 on the form. So you can record more, but just be mindful of the order that you list them in, because potentially there might be one that's listed 10th. That's really important and you want it on the form, but just because of the quantity and the order that you list them in, it may drop off. So just something to be mindful of. But in here, this is where we can record information about this specific asset once it's created. So generally things that I see in here are things like the make, the model, the serial number, the location, if it is a larger site and we're maintaining a lot of assets. Something like, it's on the first floor in this specific room, or something a bit more meaningful if there is a lot of the same asset type. What else? What I say, make, model, barcode or serial number, date of installation, if it is a specific asset specific information, so a wattage or whatever it might be. This is a text field, so you can call it whatever you like. Now, once we put this in, we do have different field types. So depending on what information you're asking for, we can select this, especially if it's, say, a barcode or a serial number. That way it's only going to accept that information in that field, as opposed to being a free text field and then maybe information might not be populated exactly how we want. Or in this case, numeric, we want a specific number and only a number. It just narrows it down for us. Now, there is an option here for lists as well. So if we did want to make the information easier to populate, especially if potentially technicians are creating assets from site through the mobile app, and they're trying to populate this as they go, rather than them having to free text everything, we could create a list here, again, to narrow it down, whether it's a make or a model and we are a bit niche, we could build that list in here for them to choose from. Now, I'm just going to change that back to text for now and click create. The other thing is we can make them mandatory if we choose to. The only thing that I would caution with that is if you do turn mandatory on, then they have to fill it out in order to proceed. Or the other way that you can get assets in the system is through a CSV import. And if this is turned on and you go to do the import and it doesn't have all of that information in the file, the import will fail. So something to be mindful of, and I might come back to my kind of tips and tricks towards the end in terms of things like that. But for now, we're just going to create a few here, just so we have a few to look at. The next tab over, we have test readings. Now, this is probably the more important of, they're both important actually, but I would say it's still pretty important. So these are the actual physical tests that the technician needs to carry out on the mobile app. So if I click create test reading, again, it is a free text field at the moment, and we do have field type with text, date, list, numeric, depending on what information we want them to populate when they're doing the test. Now, the service levels or manual, that's maintenance planner specific, so you may not have that option. That's okay. Now, with the test readings, if you do, say, have paper forms as an example that you're recording this information on at the moment, you may already have a list of what those questions or test readings are in terms of the tests that need to be done. So if you do already have that information, that's great. That will make your data entry and setup a lot more seamless, because you do have that information to then come in and populate. If you don't have that already, maybe have a chat to your BPM or maybe some other members and see if anyone has any ideas or maybe what other people are using. But generally, it's very specific to the asset type. So it's going to be industry specific and maybe asset specific in terms of the type of questions you're going to put in here. And I'm just going to pop in a random question. And I'm going to use a list for this one just to make it easier. So I find that the more list options that we can populate in the test readings, because the technicians are filling this out on the app, I guess the less they have to type, maybe the better, the quicker it is for them, especially if they're doing multiple assets, if we're talking high volume asset testing. So just be mindful, I guess, when you're creating these. Now that we've created our asset type, we've got our custom fields and our test readings, I'm going to hit save and finish. And so we've now created that and it sits in our list here for us. Now, once we've created the asset type itself, if I come back to my site that I was looking at earlier and come into my customer assets tab again. So these are some heat pumps that I said I set up earlier. Now, because I've created that new emergency and exit light asset type just now, if I now click create customer asset, I can come in here and select the asset type from the list. And then any of those custom fields that I've just set up will appear for me to enter that information. So I'm just going to put in text for now, so it will save. And now I've created the asset against that site. Go back to the site. So now we can see here, we're building out that list of the different asset types. Pardon me. So now that we've created that, depending on, I guess, the maintenance that you're doing, whether it's, let's say, site-based or whether it's more asset-based in terms of the frequency, there's different ways you can manage this. So the first one that I'm going to show you is recurring jobs. So if I hover over this recurring icon in the blue navigational menu and come into recurring jobs, we can see here there are quite a few already set up in this system. Let's just create a new one for the sake of the example. So it was laser customer, and we want to use one Rosebank because that's where I just created my asset. Perfect. So down here, we've got our recurring start date and recurring frequency and potentially recurring end date. So as an example, if you have a maintenance contract for say 12 months and you want to set this up, You could set it up, say, monthly for 12 months until the contract end date, and that way the system's going to alert us every time the maintenance is due. So if we do set this up as a recurring job, when it comes up to being due each month, it's going to show up in our bell icon in the top right hand corner, or when you go to that recurring jobs list, it will show in yellow if it's coming up to due or overdue. So it will prompt you. So let's do that 14th. Yes. Okay. So let me keep going down. Now, if I hit next, I'm just going to hit save for now. Once I open my cost center to do with the recurring job, we do have this customer assets tab. Now, because I've already created the site, you've already created the asset against the site, I can now link the asset that I've already created through this recurring job template. And the reason that I recommend that is because every time you raise this recurring job now, every month, this asset's already going to be linked to it for when the technician goes to site to do the testing. So I do see people use recurring jobs, but sometimes they set it up to prompt that a job needs to be scheduled and completed, and maybe for billing purposes. But sometimes I see that they miss this step of linking the assets, and then they have to go and manually search for those assets and then link them to the job. Where if we could just do it once, it's going to automatically do that each time we go to raise this. So I'm going to add the others just for some extra volume in there and hit save. Now, this is an example of if we're going to site once a month, and if we need to bill for each monthly visit, then we could also add that in within the parts and labor tab of the recurring job. So that way we can price it accordingly. If it's going to be a set price every month for our visit, you could just put it in here, and that way when the job's completed, it's ready for you to invoice. It's already been pre-populated with the price. So that's one way you could do it. And that's the more common way that I see, because this is all standard LaserPro functionality. There's no additional cost. All of these features are already in your system. The other way that you could do it, and if you are more in the preventative maintenance space, especially in maybe commercial preventative maintenance, is an add-on called Maintenance Planner. So this is an add-on to your LaserPro. You do have to pay extra for it, and it is billed by SimPro directly to the member because it is outside of the LaserPro package. Off the top of my head, it's the same price as a user license, and outside of your package user license. So in Australia, as an example, it's $103.20 a month plus GST. I'm assuming, I'm not sure of the Kiwi pricing for licenses. I'm assuming it's probably something similar. If you're not sure, check with your BPM and they'll be able to confirm that with SimPro. Just don't want to give out any false numbers there. But this maintenance planner add-on is really great because it does put the testing frequency on the asset itself, as opposed to, in this case, recurring job. It's all based on the site. We're going to the site every month, where with maintenance planner, we may need to go test the asset, depending on what type of asset it is. Let's say the emergency and exit light example, we might need to go 12 monthly, but we also might need to go quarterly and 6 monthly. So what we can do with the maintenance planner is, if I come back into my system setup area and back down into my customer assets, with maintenance planner, we do have this second tab available called service levels. And in here, we can set up the different frequencies that we need. So in this case, we've got yearly, quarterly, monthly, 2 yearly, some other ones that are already in the system. So once we've set up the frequencies, we can come back into our asset builder. And then in here, we open up the asset type again. We've got this extra tab once maintenance planner has been enabled. And then we can add the service levels against the asset. So I'm just going to add a couple of them. Now, the other thing with this is you can, there's this charge out column in the middle, and at the moment it's blank. So what you could do here is, depending on how you need to bill for the maintenance, if it's, say, a price per asset or price per test, you could set up a pre-build and then link the pre-build here in the charge out. So that way it's going to do all of the kind of calculations for you. We've got 10 assets against a job. When we go to raise it, they've all got the charge out rates linked with a pre-build. So then it's automatically going to price that for us based on the quantity. If there's 10 this month and there's 20 next month, it's going to adjust that cost accordingly based on the number of assets that are linked when it's raised. So if we are able to set that up, I do find that that's good long term because the system's going to do a lot of that legwork for us. There is a bit of setup involved in the first instance, but I think of it as a short-term pain for a long-term gain in that regard. So you can link that if you want to. I'm just going to click on one so you can see what it looks like. Now, once we've linked the service levels to the asset type, we hit save and finish. And that way we can see in this column here which ones do have the service levels linked and which ones don't. So if I come back to my site again, this may make a little bit more sense now. So against the heat pump as the example, we can see here yearly maintenance is a service level and it's due today. Now if I come into my emergency and exit light, because I raised this before the service levels were added, for my pre-maintenance planner example, I can come in here and add these manually if it was after the fact. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend doing that one by one. I would definitely, if we were typically doing the setup, I would do all of that back-end area of system setup first. So my asset type, service levels, custom fields, test readings, and then come and set up all my individual assets against the sites. But I just wanted to show you the segregation between the two ways. So let's say today. Great. So once we've got the asset types created and we've got assets in here, now I mentioned earlier there's a couple of different ways that you can create the assets themselves once you've done the setup. You can create them manually, like I've just done. I wouldn't recommend that if it's high volume. But if you do, say, have a large contract and the customer's giving you the asset information, or we have that information recorded somewhere in a spreadsheet, you can import it via CSV. Now, I will put some warnings here. If you do choose to import it, the files need to be per asset type. So as an example, you need a heat pump specific file import, a emergency and exit light specific file import. So it's okay if it's all in one spreadsheet to start with, but you are going to have to split them out and do some Excel manipulation to get that end result to be able to import them. So how you choose to run with that is up to you. If we're talking, 50 assets, maybe that's okay to create them manually, but if we're talking hundreds, import is probably easier. Now, my kind of rule of thumb around the imports, a lot of people get stuck on the import file, what it needs to look like or what information it needs to contain. So what I generally do is I create the first asset myself manually, and what I do is I export that out of the system via CSV, just so I can see what fields I need. So that's going to show me all of my custom fields. Because the custom fields are asset specific, heat pumps might have different information to emergency and exit light. So it's going to ask for different information on the import file, as an example. So generally, if you're not sure on what information needs to be in the file itself, create one manually, export that specific asset type out, and that way you can see what information needs to be available for the others when you put them back in. Hopefully that makes sense. If you get stuck, reach out to BPM or Simpro. There are some asset import templates on the help guide as well, if you want to have a look at those or you get stuck. But because it is very specific to your asset setup in terms of the information, I find that easier personally. I just went off on a tangent. Okay, let's keep going. So if we come to the bottom, we've got all of these different options here. So now that we've actually got some assets in the system, if we did want to change these at all, we can. So if we wanted to say change the service date, so at the moment they're all today, but if, as an example, if I wanted to say make it tomorrow, I can come in here and change it to tomorrow where I need to. Now this is for service dates, which is on the service level. So this is the maintenance planner specific feature. So if you don't have maintenance planner, this may not be available to you, in which case you would just change the due date on the recurring job if that was the case. Now, I'm going to leave them all as today actually, because I want to show you from here how to raise these assets and jobs through the maintenance planner. So if I hover over my utilities menu, if you do have maintenance planner enabled, you'll have this maintenance planner option at the top. And if I click into this, at the moment it looks pretty blank, but if we put in a date range, now I'm just going to put in today because I know my assets are due today, but generally once you've got assets set up, I would probably look at it for say a month period, just so that way you can forward plan and see what's coming for say, towards the end of say March. You might look at all of your assets that are due for April, so that way you can raise all of those jobs and schedule them in accordingly, do a bit of forward planning. So you don't have to do a month, you could do a week, but personally I like to see that longer period, and other members that I've spoken to in Australia seem to do something similar. Now you can filter it down even further if you wanted to look at a specific customer or site, asset type, etc. But generally I like to just look at everything, so it gives me a bit of a bigger picture of I guess the upcoming work that we need to do. Now at the moment it's only got one result because I'm only looking at today, but what it's showing me is that for this customer at this site, these are the different assets and asset types that are due for service. So we can see here it's got the service date. Now I will make another warning here. If these didn't have the same service date, so if one was the 13th, one was the 14th, and one was the 15th, when you are about to do the step that I'm going to do next, which is create the job, it would actually create 3 different jobs. And the reason for that is it's basing the job creation based on the service due date in the maintenance planner. So generally, if you have multiple assets and you only want to go to site once because say they're all due in the same month, I would probably recommend updating the service dates within the site that we were just looking at, using the update service date and put them all on the same day of the month. So in this case, the 14th. So that way it only raises one job for all of the assets. Now, if for some reason you do need to go multiple times in a month because it has to be done on a specific day, that's okay. You can leave it separately, but just be aware it's going to create multiple jobs. But I have seen people get a bit stumped on that in the past when it's creating 5 different jobs when it's at the same site in the same month. Unfortunately, the system isn't quite that savvy. It can't pick that up. It's basing it literally on the dates. So as long as they're aligned, you'll be okay. So what I'm going to do now is select all. And down the bottom here, we've got these different options. So if I hit skip period, it is going to skip the frequency that we're looking at. So in this case, it's yearly. So if I hit skip, it's going to push it out to 2025. So just be really mindful that if you do click that button, it is going to just skip the current period for all of the assets you've selected, and then whatever the next due date is, it's going to push to that. Create jobs, which is what we're about to do. If for any reason you need to create a quote, you could create quotes from here. And then on the end here, we've got send notification, print notification. So as an example, if you do a lot of commercial maintenance and you want to send them a reminder that you're coming, rather than doing it manually by email, you could hit send notification and it will send out that alert for you. It will send a PDF, which I will show you in a job in a minute, what it looks like. But just be mindful that if you did hit send notification here, it goes to whoever the default or primary site contact is, as opposed to the default email address on the customer card. Now, if that's the same, that's okay, but depending on how your customers and sites are set up, they may not be the same. So just be mindful that if you do hit that button, it is going to go to that contact, or if there is no primary contact on the site, well, then it's not going to send at all. So again, a disclaimer, if that's the case and you want to use that, you may need to go through and check some of your sites to make sure that there is something there. Otherwise, they're not going to get notified and we might show up without them knowing. So what I want to do now is click Create Job. It's going to say, are you sure? Okay. And then here it says the following jobs have been created. Now, because I only had one customer, one site, and all of my service level due dates were on the same day of the month, being the 14th, it's only raised one job. Now, if I had multiple customers, multiple sites, or multiple due dates on those service levels, my list could be 10, 20, 50 jobs long. It's really going to come down to how many are due now and your specific setup. But so it's raised my job for me now, and you can either click into the blue hyperlink and it will open that job for you, or in this case I have one, so I could click straight in here. But if you had, say, a longer list, we could click View Jobs, and if I come back now to my pending jobs table view, it's now sitting in my pending jobs list ready for me to schedule or do whatever I need to do for this job, whether that's raise a PO, schedule, anything like that. Now, if I click into it, what it does automatically is populates the job description with the information from the maintenance planner. So which asset it is, the asset type, which service level it is, and the due date. So that way, when the technician gets scheduled to this, they'll be able to see that in the job description from the mobile app. And then that way the assets, if I click into my cost center, custom assets. So these assets are already linked to this job now. So by using the maintenance planner and having those service level due dates, it's going to do all of the kind of job creation and asset linkage for us. And these will be available in the mobile app for them to test. Now, at the moment, it does say not tested because we haven't done the mobile portion of the workflow. But if we did want to, see if the test had been completed from the mobile app, we could open up the asset and see the history. So we can see here that in 2016, so quite a while ago, this asset was tested, and we can see what those test readings were at that point in time and whether it was passed or failed as a whole through the mobile app. So we can see the full service history of that asset if we need to click into it. I'm just going to close out of that. So if this had been tested, it would either say pass, fail, depending on what information they populated. But at the moment, it's very clear that it hasn't been done yet. So from here, I guess in the workflow, you would schedule your job as per usual. Once it comes back in, depending on how you need to bill, you could either invoice it out. If this did have a pre-build linked, it's automatically populated the price into the job for me if I do need to bill per test. Now, if you do have a maintenance contract where, say, it's a lump sum or set price every month, regardless of how many assets we're testing, this month it could be 100, next month it could be 120, just depending on when they're due. If that's the case and it is a lump sum, I wouldn't put in the pre-builds in the service levels. What you could do instead is you could create a recurring invoice for that lump sum amount. And that way it's going to invoice or generate the invoice every month for, say, whatever the amount is, let's say $10,000, probably a bit much, but who knows. And then for these jobs, we would just invoice them out at $0, or you can archive them, up to you. But obviously we want to record the history in the job, but we don't want to then use this job to bill it out because we're using the recurring invoice for that purpose. So a couple of different ways you can manage that, and it's going to come down to I guess, how you need to manage the billing for the end customer. All right, so I'm going to hit save and finish out of this job. So once we've got the assets in the system and we've started raising jobs for them and recording the history, if I hover over my reports area and come into view reports, we do have different tabs down the bottom here. So everyone will have access to this assets tab and these 3 reports. So these are standard in LaserPro. So you've got an asset list, a test history, and an asset cost analysis report that you can look at. If you do choose to add on maintenance planner, then you do have this extra tab as well called maintenance planner, and it has about half a dozen also extra reports over and above those asset specific ones. So these are all maintenance planner specific, unfortunately, if you don't have that enabled. But if you do end up having both, you have quite a array of options in terms of asset reporting to pull out of the system, whether that's for your own internal purposes or because you need to give, say, the test history to the end customer, at the end of a contract, or if you're trying to go in and renew a contract for preventative maintenance, we can pull some of this information out of the system and give that back to them. And I think that goes a long way as well. If we do have that information captured, being able to give it back to them can go a long way with them and hopefully renewing that contract. And a few other things that I will note. If I come into the site again, and come into the customer assets. So down the bottom here in our options, we have this print barcodes option. So in the mobile app, there is a barcode scanner built into the app. So if we're talking about a site that has 100 assets, rather than the technician having to, manually figure out which one's which or try and match up information, if they do have barcodes on them, we could put the barcode as, say, a custom field against the asset type. They can walk up, scan it with their mobile app, and it'll take them straight to that specific asset, and then they can test it. So it is quite easy to do, I guess, once we've got the barcode there. Now, the system can generate barcodes for you. If we say select all and go print barcodes, there are now barcodes. Okay. Probably because I haven't put the barcode custom field on those. But anyway, the system can generate the barcodes for you. The only thing that I will say with that is it's going to generate it into like a PDF for you. So yes, you can print them out and you can stick them on, but whether you print them onto labels or you laminate them, what I've seen, that just gets a bit tedious, I guess. What I've seen other people do in Australia is buy some heavy duty barcode labels from, say, a third party supplier, and then that way it can be branded. So if you do happen to get it from a third party, I've seen people get a barcode label that's quite heavy duty. It can withstand rain, weather, whatever, and that way they can put their branding on it and say their phone number. So as much as we might do the preventative maintenance, if it breaks down and they there's a reactive call, even after maybe the contract has ended, your phone number is then on the label and they're more likely to call you for the repair, even if the contract has since lapsed. So can be a bit of a way to win more work that I've seen done in Oz. But if you do choose to do that, you would just need to, the first instance when the technician goes back to that site, when they put the label on, they're just going to have to click into the custom fields and edit the barcode custom field to then link that specific barcode with that asset. So that first visit might be a bit tedious and painful for them to link them all. But again, short-term pain for long-term gain. The next time they go back to that site and do their rounds, all they have to do is walk up to it, scan it, and it takes them straight to it. So that's just one thing that I will mention. And the service level due dates, I have already mentioned that they do need to be on the same day. Otherwise, they will create multiple jobs. All right, that is my content. Now I'm going to come back to the Google Meet Is there any questions? We do have a bit of time, so if you do have any questions, we do have lots of time to cover them.
I did have a question. In that email notification, if you email the customer to let you know that you're coming, does it tell you if it doesn't send? So does
No,
the
it
screening tell you it
won't.
doesn't send? It won't?
No, it won't tell you that it won't send. It'll just recognize that there's no, say, email address or primary site contact, and then it just wouldn't send. If I come back to my maintenance planner, I'll put this for a different date range. I just wanted to double check that there wasn't an email address listed before I hit send on that. Okay, so there's no primary contact here. Okay, we'll use that as
okay. So it uses the primary contact, not the contacts in the contact section up the top.
No, because there may be multiple here, in which case, if there were, say, 5 people listed, it's not going to know which person to send it to. So it goes off whichever one is the primary on the front of the site card in the details tab.
Oh, no, great to know. Thank you.
Perfect. Is there any other questions? I feel like assets is a bit of a larger topic, and it is very specific to, I guess, the type of work that you're doing. There's a couple of different ways you can do things. But if you do have any questions about your specific scenario, please feel free to use this time to your advantage.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm joined a little bit late, but we're using recurring jobs and have for a while, and I'm just wondering what does maintenance planner do that the recurring jobs doesn't? What, in a nutshell, what's what would we be paying the extra for, other than maybe able to do that allows us to do, because recurring jobs you can only do one asset per job. It's maintenance planner, you can do multiple assets per one job. Is that right?
So the way that I typically describe it, you can link more than one asset to a recurring job. My kind of rule of thumb is, does the frequency need to be site specific or does it need to be asset specific? Because if it's the case where you go to site once a month and you're just going to test absolutely everything, then recurring jobs is perfect for that. But if the frequency needs to be more so at the asset level, because we need to do a 12 monthly, a quarterly, a monthly, 6 monthly, whatever that might be against the asset, we need to do multiple visits on different frequencies. And some months we might test 200 assets and another month we might only test 100. Then that's where maintenance planner can kind of pick that up and differentiate between the testing frequencies and give you a bit more flexibility in that regard. And you actually just reminded me, there was a maintenance planner specific feature that I forgot to mention. So I will go back into that now. So in addition to the service levels that we were talking about, so the frequencies, once we've applied those frequencies to the asset type, it's not very obvious, but once you know about it, it's very helpful. So if I click options on the service level against the asset type, we have the section called failure points. So this is really helpful if they go to site, they've tested it and it's failed for any reason. We can set up failure points for the technician to select, why it's failed. And then what that's going to do is actually prompt a notification in your red bell icon saying that an asset has been failed and the reason why it's failed, and it's going to suggest that you create a rectification quote. Now, if you link a pre-build here to the reason that it's failed, not only can you create the rectification quote, it's also going to price the rectification quote for you if you've inserted the pre-build here. Now, I have seen people use this for the rectification quote kind of workflow, but obviously they might want to price it themselves, in which case you just wouldn't link a pre-build here. But we can say put in that it's because the damaged wiring, whatever it might be. We could create 5, or create 1, you create 5. And then we can also put in here the severity, whether it's critical, non-critical, non-compliant, non-conformant. So that way this will show on any, I guess, reports or forms that we pull out of the system about that failed asset. So to answer your question, the service levels and the failure points are the probably main things that set maintenance planner apart from the recurring jobs, in addition to that half a dozen or so reports that come with maintenance planner as well.
Okay, so because maintenance, the normal recurring jobs, you can create a report for the customer. Are the reports on maintenance planner any bigger and better, or are they exactly the same?
Let me save and finish. So because they're, let me go back into the reports area. So the asset specific ones that are available without maintenance planner. So you can see the asset list. So it's going to give you all of the assets, and you can filter by asset types. The test history. So if you did need to give the history report to the customer, you could filter it by customer or a specific site, and it'll give you all the test results within that date range. So that can be helpful. A cost analysis report, so it gives you all the costings based on the jobs that they're linked to try and give you a breakdown. So they're all standard reports, but where maintenance planner, I guess, goes over and above that, we've got the program preventative maintenance report to see past and planned asset tests within a period. So you can kind of forward plan, I guess, for coming months based on tests, previous tests, testing averages, annual system condition reports. So while this is a report, what it's actually going to give you as an end result is a PDF with the system condition on it. So it is a report, but it can also pull out the form if you do need to give that to the customer, as part of a contract, as an example, if that's an obligation that you have. Maintenance planner jobs that have been created. So yes, you can see the jobs just in your pending jobs table view, but if you wanted to report on which jobs have been created through maintenance planner specifically. System activity. So this one will show you the defects and rectification quotes raised as well. So I guess that ties into that failure points feature that I was just talking about. Certificate of maintenance, so similar to the system condition 1, it is a report, but it's going to give you that PDF as an end result. And asset labor planning. So if you are linking, say, pre-builds to the service levels, then you could use that and do your forward labor planning if you do have times and pre-builds linked to it. So that's a bit specific to the pre-build setup, but if you are using that, it can be quite helpful. So they're not exactly the same. They have slightly different purposes because they're using those slightly different features to pull out these specific reports.
Okay, thank you.
But good question, and thank you for reminding me about failure points. I missed that the first round.
No worries, thanks.
All right, we only have a few minutes left. I know we started a little bit late, but I'm conscious of your time and letting you get back to your day. So if there's any final questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute yourself. Wonderful. Well, in that case, I will give you a couple of minutes of your day back. That was nice and efficient considering we started late. So apologies about the mix up with the Google Meet link and the calendar link. I'll get that sorted for next month. But I hope you all have a great day.